My family pushed me out into a snowstorm without a coat, without a goodbye, like I'd never been their daughter at all. My sister watched from the upstairs window, smiling, wine glass in hand. That night, I made 3 quiet calls. By morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Before I tell you how everything turned, take a moment to follow the channel and comment where you're watching from, because what they didn't know I had would change everything they built. My name is Alohan Hale, and I never liked the east wing of Halecrest Manor. The air there always felt disciplined, like it had been trained to behave. Dust didn't settle, sounds didn't linger. Even footsteps softened themselves out of habit. Marissa Hale believed order was the highest form of virtue, and that room reflected her perfectly, controlled, polished, unyielding. The portraits lining the walls didn't help. Generations of curated smiles stared down with practiced confidence. They looked like people who had already agreed on the story and were just waiting for everyone else to catch up. It was late autumn in Silver Pine Ridge when I returned for the Hale Legacy Trust's annual dinner. The invitation arrived the way it always did. Not from my parents, not from my sister, but as a calendar event sent from the Trust's office. No greeting, no warmth. Just a reminder that my presence was expected, not wanted. I stepped inside, the cold slipping in with me despite the sealed doors and roaring fireplaces. The manor smelled like polish and pine, like something trying very hard to feel timeless. Leora Hale stood in the central hall, arranging the exhibit she curated every year. Framed photos, trophies, press clippings, carefully chosen pieces that told one story and erased every other version that didn't fit. She didn't look up when I entered. "Make yourself useful," she said, gesturing toward a stack of silver frames. "Sort the ones from the 90s. We're leaning into continuity this year." I didn't ask questions. I never did anymore. Questions had a way of making people uncomfortable when the answers didn't serve them. I lifted each frame carefully, scanning dates and captions, placing them in order. That's when I noticed it, or rather didn't. The photograph from my 10th birthday was gone, the one my grandfather Thomas had taken. Me standing between Leora and our parents, frosting smeared across my chin, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. In its place sat a polished equestrian photo of Leora. Perfect posture, metal gleaming, everything composed. I picked it up. "What happened to my birthday photo?" I asked quietly. Marissa barely turned. "That one didn't reproduce well. The lighting was off. Besides, this tells a stronger story." "Of course it does." I nodded and set the frame back down, forcing my fingers to stay steady. She didn't notice the tremor anyway. She never noticed what didn't align with her version of things. Later, in the hallway, I ran into Leora herself. She wore silk, carried herself like Silver Pine Ridge belonged to her, and smiled like someone who already knew the ending of a book I was still trapped inside. "If you were memorable," she said lightly as she brushed past me, "they'd remember you." The words landed softly, cleanly, designed to bruise later. I turned to face her back. "Then I guess I'll have to become unforgettable." She didn't turn around. 2 weeks later, Halecrest Manor transformed for her engagement showcase. Chandeliers dimmed just right. Champagne walls gleamed. Every detail screamed celebration and permanence. I wore a navy dress. Nothing dramatic, just tailored enough to remind myself I still existed. I paused at the welcome board and scanned the seating chart. My name sat at the bottom. Hospitality coordination. Table near the service hallway. The kind of seat reserved for complaints, not family. A young waiter approached. "You're part of the hospitality circle, right?" Before I could answer, Leora passed by, crystal flute in hand. "Someone has to make guests feel welcome," she murmured, never slowing. I followed the hallway alone. Instead of sitting, I left an envelope on her chair at the head table. Sealed. Elegant. Empty. Let her wonder what I didn't say. Outside, snow had begun to fall, light and glittering beneath the estate's lights. Through the tall windows, I watched them toast. Marissa in velvet. My father, Edwin, smiling for the cameras. Leora glowing beneath the chandelier. Everyone warm. Everyone framed exactly how they wanted the world to see them. And me? Already fading. I didn't know yet that this wasn't the worst part. The storm hadn't even started. I always thought leaving that night would be the end of it. Walking away from Halecrest Manor felt like closing a door that had been half shut my entire life. What I didn't understand yet was that they had already been planning my absence long before I ever stepped outside into the snow. The morning after the engagement showcase, Silver Pine Ridge looked deceptively peaceful. Snow rested lightly on rooftops, smoothing every sharp edge, pretending nothing beneath it was fractured. I stood in the lobby of Silver Pine Regional Medical Center, holding a manila folder that felt heavier than it should have. The heater clicked and hummed beside me as if it were trying to convince the building to stay alive. I wasn't there because of an emergency. I was there because something had started bothering me in a way I couldn't ignore. Memory has a strange way of resurfacing when you finally stop trying to protect it. The accident happened when I was 19. Winter break. Ridgeway Pass, slick with ice. A deer crossing too fast for reaction. The car spun, then silence, then waking up to Marissa's voice telling me they never left my side. Edwin had said they slept in chairs for 2 nights straight. Back then, I believed them because I needed to. When my name was called, I followed a young administrator down a narrow hallway. She handed me a printed copy of my medical file. Everything looked normal at first glance. Procedures, notes, dates. I hesitated, then asked casually, "Could you pull the visitor log from my stay? I need it for insurance verification." She paused. That look people give when they're deciding whether it's worth questioning you. Then she disappeared and returned with a clipboard. The page was almost blank. No signatures. No names. No Marissa. No Edwin. No Leora. "I'm sorry," she said softly. No visitors were logged during those dates. I nodded as if that made sense. Some truths land quietly because they've been waiting a long time. On the drive home, I didn't cry. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. I told myself this wasn't the worst discovery I'd make. It was just the one that settled deepest. Back in my apartment, I set the file on the counter and made tea. No rush. No panic. Just heat and time. That afternoon, I found the Trust Quarterly Review tucked into my mail slot. Thick paper, embossed gold lettering. Always too proud of itself. Inside was the family tree graphic. Marissa and Edwin at the top. Leora centered beneath them, complete with accolades in parentheses. And then there was me. Eloan Hale. Misspelled. My birth date wrong. A small note beneath my name read, "Relocated. Currently unlisted in Trust Network." I stared at the page until the tea went cold. I took a photo and sent it to Leora with one line. "Do you think they'll fix this next edition?" Her reply came quickly. "It's probably a clerical error. Don't be dramatic." I typed back slowly. "You don't misspell people you remember." She didn't respond again. That night, while reorganizing old paperwork, I opened a moving crate I'd never fully unpacked. At the bottom was a folder labeled Event RSVPs. I didn't remember why I'd kept it. Habit, maybe. Or instinct. Inside was a guest list from a Trust gala 2 years earlier. The one Marissa told me I was too busy to attend. My name was there, crossed out in red ink. Not scratched. Not erased. Cleanly crossed through. They didn't forget me. They planned not to include me. I lay awake on the couch with my laptop open, the glow casting long shadows across the walls. I wasn't looking for anything specific when I opened an old email archive from my university account. It had been backed up during a system migration years ago. Buried near the bottom was a thread between Edwin and Leora. Subject line: Foundation structure, next quarter. Leora wrote, "If she keeps asking questions, we may need to realign who appears in board materials. Optics matter." Edwin replied, "Eloan is excess weight. Polished but inconvenient. Then Leora again. Then we drop her before she slows us down. I closed the laptop slowly. Not because I was shocked, but because I finally understood the precision of it. A memory surfaced then, Marissa hosting a healing brunch weeks after one of our quiet arguments. Citrus tea. Soft music. Her insisting I drink before we talked. You need to come to the table calm, she'd said. I remembered feeling dizzy. Foggy. Words slipping away from me like they'd been loosened. That night, I scrolled through old text messages from that week. Messages I supposedly sent to friends. Short. Mechanical. One read, "All is well in the House of Mirrors." I would never say that. Gaslighting doesn't erase reality. It teaches you to distrust your right to it. I printed the emails and slid them into a folder labeled Truth. Fireproof. Password protected. Hidden where no one would think to look. 5 days later, I returned to Halecrest Manor. I told Marissa I needed financial records for a tax audit. She waved me through like I was still harmless, like I still didn't matter. The lower records vault smelled like stone and old paper. Ledgers stacked, neatly by year. On the third shelf, behind a dusty binder, I found a leather envelope without a label. Inside was my grandfather's handwriting. The original trust directive. My name was there, not as a footnote, not as a suggestion, as a controlling beneficiary. I sank into the nearest chair, breath stuttering. Across the room, I found the version everyone knew. Digitized. Clean. My name missing. I wasn't forgotten. I was replaced. A note slipped from between the pages. If they cut you out, it means they fear the questions you ask. I scanned everything, uploaded it, backed it up, then tucked the originals into my bag. As I turned off the lights, Marissa stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. "You still like wandering," she said lightly. I walked past her. I always find what's hiding. She didn't stop me. That silence told me everything. 2 nights later, the storm arrived. Real this time. Wind held against Halecrest Manor like it wanted answers. I stood in the foyer, coatless, holding the envelope. Marissa and Edwin stood opposite me, polished and calm. "I found the directive," I said. Marissa smiled. "You always read too much into things." Edwin stepped forward, retrieved my phone and keys, and opened the door. "You wanted independence," he said. "Go live it." The cold rushed in. The door closed behind me. Snow soaked into my socks instantly. Halfway down the driveway, I looked up. Leora stood at the window, wine glass raised, smiling. I didn't know yet that I wouldn't make it to the gate on my own. The cold didn't feel real at first. It never does. At first it's just sharp, then numbing, then strangely distant, like it belongs to someone else. Snow filled my shoes in seconds, soaking through my socks, seeping into places I didn't know could ache that fast. Each step down the driveway felt heavier, not because of the incline, but because my body was already starting to slow itself to conserve something I couldn't name yet. I didn't run. Running would have wasted breath. The wind cut across my face like a reprimand. Halecrest Manor loomed behind me, all light and warmth and curated legacy. I didn't look back again, not because I was brave, but because I knew exactly what I'd see if I did. Leora's silhouette, the raised glass, the quiet satisfaction of watching something removed. The gate felt impossibly far away. My fingers had stopped hurting, which scared me more than the pain had. I flexed them once, twice. They barely responded. My breaths came shallow now, each one scraping the inside of my chest. Snow blurred the edges of the world, turning everything into white motion and shadow. I told myself to count steps. 10 more, then 10 again. I made it past the hedge, row before my knees buckled. The ground rushed up to meet me, cold and hard and final. Snow pressed against my cheek, melting just enough to remind me I was still warm somewhere inside. I closed my eyes for half a second, just to rest them. Headlights cut through the white. Gravel crunched. A door slammed. Hey, stay with me. Don't you close your eyes. Hands gripped my shoulders, firm, warm, real. A coat settled around me, heavy and rough and welcome. The voice was steady, practiced in emergencies, not panicked. You're not dying tonight, the woman said close to my ear. Not on my watch. I tried to answer. Nothing came out. That was the last thing I remembered. I woke up warm. Not hospital warm. Not clinical. The warmth of something lived in, something that had learned how to hold heat without showing off. A quilt covered me, stitched unevenly, heavy in a comforting way. The air smelled like cinnamon and old wood and something faintly herbal. I blinked slowly. A fire crackled somewhere nearby. The room was small. Wooden beams. A window dusted with snow. No machines. No fluorescent lights. A woman stood in the doorway, watching me carefully, like she didn't want to startle me back into whatever place I had just left. You're awake, she said softly. Good. Don't sit up too fast. She stepped forward and handed me a mug. Steam curled upward. Chamomile, she added. Honey. Nothing else. I promise. Something about that made me smile, even though my lips felt stiff. Where am I? My voice sounded thin, like it had traveled a long way to reach my mouth. My place, she said. North Willow. About 10 minutes from the ridge. I took a sip. It burned just enough to reassure me. I'm Maeve Calder. The name landed strangely familiar. As the fog in my head thinned, memories surfaced uninvited. A blue scarf. A winter bonfire years ago. A lullaby about stars I hadn't heard since childhood. You used to sing to me, I said quietly. Her eyes softened. Your mother hated that. Said it made children sentimental. The last piece clicked into place. You were supposed to be my godmother, I said. Not officially, Maeve replied, sitting beside the bed. But yes, I held you when you cried. Before I started asking questions your parents didn't like. My fingers tightened around the mug. They pushed you out, I said. She nodded once. Quietly, the way they do everything uncomfortable. Later that morning, after I'd changed into clothes she laid out, sweats, flannel that smelled faintly of cedar, Maeve led me into her study. Books lined every wall. Old, used, loved. On her desk sat an aging computer humming softly. She opened a drawer and placed a flash drive in my hand. They thought I deleted everything, she said. I didn't. I plugged it in. Files bloomed across the screen. Tax records, transfers, audio clips, meeting notes. One recording played automatically. Edwin's voice, calm and detached. If Aloan stays involved, we'll have problems. Keep her distracted. Let her feel included, just not informed. Another clip. Marissa, as long as she's out of the picture, we won't have to compromise image for integrity. I didn't flinch. I was past that stage. Maeve stood beside me. I don't believe in payback, she said quietly, but I believe in truth that knows how to defend itself. I copied everything, backed it up, created redundancies, set timers. That night, as snow continued to fall outside her windows, I sat at the kitchen table and sent an email to Jonah Reed. Subject: private matter involving family trust misconduct. He responded within the hour. If this is real, call me. By sunrise, my phone showed 19 missed calls. Unknown numbers. Hailcrest silence had finally broken. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one standing outside in the cold. I didn't return to Hailcrest Manor after that night. I didn't need to. The house had already done what it was designed to do, protect the people inside it, and freeze out anything that threatened the image. Maeve's home in North Willow felt like the opposite of that. It wasn't impressive. It was honest. Floors creaked. Doors stuck in the winter. Nothing tried to pretend it was eternal. The first full day after the storm passed quietly. Too quietly. That's how I knew something was already happening. Jonah Reed called just after sunrise. His voice was calm, but alert, like someone who'd already finished reading a crime scene and was now choosing his words carefully. "I listened to everything you sent," he said. "Multiple times." I sat at Maeve's kitchen table, wrapped in a blanket, hands around a mug that had long since gone cold. "And?" I asked. "And this wasn't an accident," he replied. "This was a coordinated removal. Financial, reputational, psychological." I let that settle. "They didn't just exclude you," Jonah continued. "They insulated themselves from you, which means they were afraid of something." I glanced toward Maeve, who stood at the window pretending not to listen. "I found the original trust directive," I said. "My grandfather named me." Jonah exhaled slowly. "That changes the scope." "How much?" "Enough that they can't bury it quietly anymore." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not excitement, not fear, relief. Because quiet erasure thrives on isolation, and I wasn't isolated anymore. Jonah outlined the steps, without drama. Documentation review, independent verification, external reporting channels. Nothing rushed, nothing sloppy. Truth moved best when it didn't announce itself. By noon, I had signed temporary representation documents. By evening, Jonah had looped in 2 forensic accountants and 1 compliance investigator who owed him favors from past cases. Maeve listened without interrupting. When the call ended, she set a plate of food in front of me. "You don't look hungry," she said. "I'm not," I replied. "You still need to eat." I did. That night, my phone buzzed again. And again. Unknown numbers. Voicemails left without messages. One text slipped through from a number I recognized immediately. "Leora, we need to talk." I didn't answer. Silence had protected them for years. It was my turn to use it. The next morning, Jonah sent me a message. "They're scrambling," it read. "Quietly, moving accounts, reclassifying funds." "How much time do they have?" I asked. "Less than they think." I spent the day organizing files, labeling timelines, cross-checking dates. Every time I expected to feel overwhelmed, I felt steadier instead. This wasn't chaos. It was clarity delayed. By mid-afternoon, Maeve handed me another mug of tea. "You're not shaking," she observed. "I already did that part," I said. That evening, the Hale Legacy Trust website went into maintenance mode. That was new. The following day, an article appeared in a small regional business journal. Buried near the bottom, a neutral headline about internal restructuring within the trust. No accusations, no names, just movement. Jonah called an hour later. "That's their test balloon," he said. "They're checking to see if the ground shakes." "And does it?" I asked. He paused. "It will." By the 3rd day, donors started asking questions. Quiet ones at first. Clarification requests. Verification of grant allocations. Jonah forwarded me a spreadsheet showing irregular transfers spanning years. "They've been redirecting funds," he said. "Not illegally at first. Then creatively. Then outright." I closed my eyes. "They didn't think you'd ever see this," he added. That night, Maeve and I sat by the fire. Snow fell softly outside, gentler now, like it had already delivered its message. "Do you want them punished?" she asked suddenly. I considered the question. "I want them exposed," I said finally. "Punishment implies emotion. I don't feel that anymore." Maeve nodded. "Good. Emotion makes people sloppy." The 4th morning began with a knock at the door. A courier. He handed me a certified envelope. No return address. Inside was a letter written in Marissa's handwriting. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I slid it into a drawer and locked it. That same afternoon, Jonah called again. "We're escalating," he said. "Next step is controlled disclosure." "To whom?" "People who don't care about your family name." The phrase stuck with me. By evening, another article dropped. This one larger. A finance columnist questioning transparency in long-standing charitable foundations. The trust's name appeared once. Carefully. That was enough. My phone rang again. This time, I recognized the number. Edwin. I let it ring. Then I turned it off. Silence isn't passive when it's chosen. It's strategic. On the 5th day, Maeve took me into town. Fresh air. Movement. Normalcy. At a small cafe, someone recognized me. Not from the family. From a panel I'd spoken on years earlier about ethical stewardship. You're low in hail, she said cautiously. Yes, I replied. She hesitated. I'm glad you're okay. So the whispers had started. That afternoon, Jonah sent one final message. Tomorrow changes everything. I slept deeply that night for the first time since the storm. Morning came bright and cold. At 6:58 a.m., the first major outlet broke the story. Not dramatic. Documented. Misallocation. Omission. Patterned erasure. By 7:15, the Trust's board released a statement denying wrongdoing. By 7:30, donors began freezing accounts. At 8:04, Jonah called. They're panicking, he said. And I asked, and they just made a mistake. What kind? They mentioned you. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. They said you were no longer affiliated. I smiled faintly. They just acknowledged I existed. Outside, the snow began falling again. This time I was inside, and the door behind them was starting to crack. By the time the sun climbed over Silver Pine Ridge, the story no longer belonged to my family. It didn't belong to me either. That was the strange part. Once the truth started moving, it didn't wait for permission. It didn't ask for guidance. It didn't care who felt exposed or embarrassed or misunderstood. It moved the way avalanches do. Quiet at first, then suddenly everywhere. Maeve had the television on, volume low. We weren't watching for drama. We were watching for patterns. The anchor spoke carefully, as if every word had been weighed by a legal team. Documents had surfaced. Questions were being raised. Long-standing foundations were under review. The Hale Legacy Trust was named, but not yet accused. Not directly. Not yet. Jonah called just after 7. They're bleeding credibility, he said. Not publicly screaming, but internally. Boards hate this kind of uncertainty. I stood near the window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching snow slide from the roof in soft clumps. What's the next move? I asked. They'll try to control the narrative, Jonah replied. Paint you as unstable, disgruntled, emotional. I smiled faintly. They already started that years ago. Exactly, he said, which makes it less effective now. By mid-morning, the Trust's website came back online. Clean, neutral, a statement posted front and center. Words like commitment, transparency, values. My name appeared once. Formally affiliated. Not a denial. Not an apology. A dismissal. Maeve scoffed from the kitchen. They still think language can save them. It used to, I said. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I let it go. Then another. Then another. Voicemails stacked without messages, like missed breaths. At 11, Jonah sent a link. A national outlet this time. The headline didn't mention me. It didn't need to. It focused on patterns. How certain family-run foundations quietly redirected resources. How internal dissenters often vanished from records. How legacy structures protected image over accountability. My grandfather's words echoed in my head. Power doesn't corrupt. It reveals who's been rehearsing longest. By noon, the Trust's donors began issuing statements. Some distanced themselves. Some froze contributions. One quietly resigned from the advisory board without explanation. Leora's face appeared briefly on screen during a gala clip from years earlier. She was laughing, radiant, speaking about stewardship and inclusion. The clip ended. The anchor moved on. The absence was louder than any accusation. I hadn't heard from my parents yet. That silence felt intentional. Maeve watched me carefully as I scrolled through updates. "You're waiting for something," she said. "I know," I replied. "I just don't know when." It came at 1:47 p.m. A knock at the door. Not a courier this time. 2 people stood outside. A man and a woman. Both dressed professionally, but not ostentatiously. The kind of calm that comes from authority, not performance. "Ms. Hale?" the woman asked. "Yes. We're with the Northland State Financial Oversight Division. May we come in?" Maeve didn't look surprised. She stepped aside, already reaching for another chair. They sat at the table, opened slim folders, asked measured questions. How long had I been excluded? When did I discover the directive? Did I have documentation? I answered calmly, precisely, no emotion attached. They took notes. The man glanced up at me once. "Your cooperation is appreciated." "I'm not cooperating," I said evenly. "I'm clarifying." They exchanged a look. After they left, Maeve exhaled slowly. "That's the point of no return." "Yes," I said. "For them." The afternoon dragged in a way time only does when it's waiting for something else to break. News cycles updated. Analysts speculated. Names circled without landing. At 4:12 my phone rang. This time I answered. "Hello." Marissa's voice came through thin and controlled. "Eloan." I closed my eyes. "You've made this very difficult," she said. "I didn't," I replied. "You did." She inhaled sharply. "You didn't need to involve outsiders." "You involved them the moment you rewrote legal documents," I said calmly. A pause. "We protected the family," she said. "No," I corrected. "You protected control." Her voice softened, dangerously. "You don't understand how fragile these things are." "I do," I said. "That's why I stopped pretending they were healthy." Another pause. "This could have been handled privately," she said. "You tried that," I replied. "It didn't include me." She didn't respond. The line went dead. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. By evening, the trust released another statement. Longer. More defensive. It named me directly this time, describing my departure as voluntary and amicable. Jonah called seconds later. "They just contradicted internal records," he said. "That's sloppy." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means tomorrow won't be kind to them." That night I slept. Deeply. No dreams. No replay. Just rest. Morning arrived with clarity. At 6:30 a.m., Clara Winslow's article dropped. She didn't embellish. She didn't editorialize. She simply laid out the timeline. The directive. The altered records. The internal correspondence. The pattern of erasure. My name appeared once. Not as a victim. As evidence. By 7:10, the Trust's board chair resigned. By 7:45, regulators announced a formal investigation. By 8 o'clock, Edwin Hale's face appeared on screen outside Halecrest Manor. Reporters pressing microphones toward him. "Mr. Hale," someone asked, "did you knowingly approve the removal of your daughter from Foundation records?" He opened his mouth. No words came out. The silence stretched. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't me standing there without a voice. Maeve turned off the television. "That," she said quietly, "is what collapse looks like when no one's shouting." My phone buzzed again. A text from Leora. "You didn't have to do this." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "You did." I set the phone down. Outside, the snow had stopped. The world looked clean in that fragile, temporary way it always does after something has been torn open. I knew this wasn't the end, but it was the moment they realized I wasn't coming back, and that whatever was coming next, they wouldn't be writing it. By the third morning after Clara Winslow's article went live, the silence had changed tone. It wasn't absence anymore. It was waiting. Maeve noticed it before I did. She always did. She moved through the kitchen slower, listening between sounds, the kettle clicking off, the radiator ticking, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. When people stop calling, it usually means they've stopped asking for permission. Jonah Reed called at exactly 7:02 a.m. "They've frozen everything," he said without greeting. "Accounts, disbursements, internal transfers. The trust is effectively paralyzed." I leaned against the counter, phone pressed to my ear, watching steam rise from my coffee. "And my parents?" I asked. "They're not speaking to each other," Jonah replied. "And your sister is lawyering up separately." That surprised me more than I expected. "Separately?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, "which tells me something broke inside the house before it broke in public." I ended the call and sat down slowly. Families don't collapse all at once. They crack along lines that were already there. By mid-morning, Northland state officials returned, this time with a federal liaison. They didn't sit at the table anymore. They stood, clipboards closed, questions sharper. "Did your grandfather ever express concern about document handling?" "Yes." "Did you witness alterations?" "Yes." "Did anyone explain why your name was removed?" "No." They exchanged looks that carried more weight than words. When they left, Maeve locked the door behind them and leaned back against it. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. And for once it was true. I spent the afternoon reviewing timelines Jonah sent over. Dates overlapped too cleanly to be coincidence. My erasure lined up precisely with grant reallocations, with Leora's rise, with Marissa's new board seat. I hadn't been inconvenient. I had been in the way. That evening, a courier arrived with another certified envelope. This one from Edwin. I opened it. The letter was short, controlled, written like a business memo disguised as regret. "This situation has spiraled beyond intention. We should meet privately and resolve this before irreversible harm occurs." I folded the letter once. Then again, irreversible harm had already occurred. It just hadn't been visible to him yet. I didn't respond. At 9:18 p.m., my phone rang again. Blocked number. I answered. "Eloin," Edwin said. His voice sounded thinner than I remembered. "You need to understand." "No," I interrupted gently. "You need to listen." Silence. "I didn't do this to hurt you," he said. "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't think about me at all." He inhaled sharply. "Your sister is panicking." I almost laughed. She should. That night, I dreamed of the east wing of Halecrest Manor. Only this time, the portraits were blank. Frames empty. Walls stripped. No faces watching. I woke before dawn. By sunrise, the first subpoena was issued. Jonah didn't sound surprised when he told me. "They're going through archived communications. Everything you saved just became central." "What about the directive?" I asked. "They found corroboration," he said. "Third-party witnesses. Former counsel. Someone talked." Maeve raised an eyebrow from across the room. Someone always does when silence stops protecting them. The story shifted that afternoon. Not louder, deeper. Analysts stopped speculating and started mapping. Articles connected dots that had never been meant to touch. My name appeared less frequently now, not because I mattered less, but because the story had grown beyond me. The trust was no longer the subject. The system was. At 3:27 p.m., Jonah called again. "They're requesting testimony," he said. "When?" I asked. "Soon." That night, I received a message I didn't expect. From Leora. "They lied to me too." I stared at the screen. "They told me you walked away," she wrote. "That you didn't want involvement." I typed slowly. "You never asked." The reply came almost immediately. I didn't think I had to. I didn't respond. Some realizations don't earn absolution just because they arrive late. The following day, Halecrest Manor appeared on the news again. This time the gates were closed. Vehicles moved in and out quietly. No lights on in the East Wing. I felt nothing watching it. A house that teaches you to disappear doesn't deserve nostalgia. That afternoon, Maeve placed a small box on the table. "I kept this," she said. "Didn't think you'd need it. Guess I was wrong." Inside were old cassette tapes, labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Meetings, notes, conversations. One tape crackled to life. Thomas Hale's voice filled the room. "If they push her out," he said calmly, "it will not be because she lacks strength. It will be because she refuses to lie." I closed my eyes. Jonah listened to the tapes that night. All of them. "They didn't know this existed," he said quietly. "And now it does." The next morning, a warrant was issued for internal trust records. By noon, Marissa resigned from every board position she held. At 2:15 p.m., Leora released a statement distancing herself from prior administrative decisions. Jonah sent it to me with one word. Predictable. The last call of the day came from an unfamiliar number. "Eloin Hale," a woman asked. "Yes." "This is Agent Corin with the Federal Financial Integrity Unit. We'd like to speak with you tomorrow." I agreed. After the call, Maeve poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward me. "They're done pretending," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Now they're afraid of what comes next." Outside, snow began falling again. Light, steady, relentless. I watched it gather on the ground. Knowing somewhere inside Halecrest Manor, doors were closing, rooms were being emptied, and stories were collapsing faster than anyone could rewrite them. By nightfall, my phone showed 32 missed calls. None from my parents. One from Leora. I didn't answer, because the next part of this story wasn't about reconciliation. It was about consequence. And for the first time, I wasn't standing alone when it arrived. The building where I gave my testimony didn't look imposing. That surprised me. I had expected stone columns or cold glass or some architectural signal that what happened inside would matter. Instead, it looked like any other government structure. Functional, unremarkable, indifferent to drama. Which, I realized as I walked through security, made it more dangerous than anything ornate. Places like this didn't care who you were before you arrived. They only cared about what you could prove once you were inside. Agent Corin met me in the lobby. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, posture that suggested she listened more than she spoke. She didn't offer condolences. She didn't soften her tone. She shook my hand once and led me down a quiet hallway. "We'll record everything," she said as we walked. "You can stop at any point." "I won't need to," I replied. The room was small. Neutral walls. A table. 2 chairs. A recorder already running. Another agent sat quietly in the corner, not watching me so much as watching the space around me. Agent Corin began without preamble. Dates. Names. Relationships. When I first noticed discrepancies. When I found the original trust directive. Who had access to the lower records vault. Who benefited from the changes. I answered steadily. I didn't rush. I didn't embellish. I let silence exist when it needed to. At one point she asked, "Did you ever confront your parents directly before the night you were removed from the estate?" "Yes," I said. "How did they respond?" "They treated concern like disloyalty." She nodded, as if that confirmed something already written in her notes. When the recorder was turned off, she leaned back slightly. "You understand this won't end quietly." "I understand it already didn't," I said. She studied me for a moment. "You're not trying to destroy them." "No," I replied. "I'm trying to stop them." "There's a difference." And she heard it. When I stepped outside, the air felt different. Thinner. Sharper. Like something had been released. Jonah was waiting in his car across the street. He didn't ask how it went. He didn't need to. "Someone flipped," he said as I slid into the passenger seat. "Who?" I asked. He pulled away from the curb before answering. "Not who you'd expect." By evening, the first sealed motion was filed. I didn't see it, but Jonah did. He described it carefully, choosing words like a surgeon. They're forcing disclosure on internal communications, personal devices included. I closed my eyes briefly. That's going to hurt, I said. Yes, he replied, especially because your sister's name keeps coming up. Leora. The word felt heavier now than it ever had. That night, my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect to receive. Maeve, sitting across from me, looked up as my expression changed. Who is it? Leora, I said quietly. I didn't open the message right away. I stared at the screen, remembering the window, the wine glass, the smile. Finally, I read it. They're asking me to testify tomorrow. Maeve inhaled slowly. That was fast. I typed back. Tell the truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I don't know what that is anymore, Leora wrote. I set the phone down without responding. Truth isn't something you negotiate when it's inconvenient. The next morning, Halecrest Manor appeared on every major outlet again. This time the footage showed boxes being carried out. Files, computers, no music, no commentary, just documentation. By noon, the trust's legal counsel withdrew. That doesn't happen unless the ship is already taking on water. Jonah's voice was tight when he called. Your mother's attorney requested a private meeting. No, I said. I thought you'd say that. Anything else? I asked. Yes, he said. Your sister agreed to testify. I closed my eyes. The hearing wasn't public, but leaks have a way of finding daylight. By late afternoon, the narrative shifted again. Not about misallocation, not about governance failures, about betrayal, specifically internal betrayal. Leora's statement didn't name me. It didn't absolve her either. It did something worse. It confirmed intent. She admitted she knew my name had been removed. She claimed she was told it was temporary, strategic, necessary. That word again. Necessary. By evening, commentators stopped asking if charges would be filed and started asking when. Maeve poured wine that night. Just 1 glass. To the end of pretending, she said. I clinked my glass against hers. The following day, Edwin Hale was officially removed from the trust board pending investigation. Marissa wasn't seen. Not in public. Not in statements. Not anywhere. Silence had finally swallowed her whole. 2 days later, Jonah called with news that made him pause before speaking. They found something else, he said. What? I asked. Your grandfather amended the directive again, shortly before he died. My heart stuttered. There's a codicil, Jonah continued. It activates if the primary beneficiary is removed without cause. And I asked, and it transfers authority away from the trust entirely. I sat down slowly. To whom? I asked. Jonah exhaled. To you. Individually. The room felt suddenly too quiet. Maeve stared at me. That means... I know, I said. It means they didn't just erase me. I didn't finish the sentence, because the implication was already echoing through Halecrest Manor, through courtrooms, through boardrooms where people were realizing too late that control had never been as secure as they believed. That night my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. Eloin, Marissa said. Her voice sounded hollow. I just wanted you to know, she said. This isn't what I wanted. I closed my eyes. It never is, I replied. She whispered my name like it might save her. It didn't. The call ended. And with it, the last illusion that this was still a family matter. Because now it was something else entirely. Something written years ago. Something they never thought would be read. The paperwork arrived before the headlines did. Jonah warned me it would happen that way. Legal reality always moves faster than public understanding. While people were still arguing online about motives and morality, documents were already being signed, countersigned, and logged into systems that didn't care about feelings. The codicil was real. Thomas Hale hadn't just anticipated resistance. He'd anticipated erasure. The clause was airtight, written in language that left no room for interpretation. If the primary beneficiary, me, was removed from trust operations without documented cause and independent review, authority would transfer out of the trust entirely. Not to another board, not to a committee, to me, individually. When Jonah explained it, he didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He just sat across from me at Maeve's kitchen table and let the weight of it settle. "This doesn't make you powerful," he said carefully. "It makes you unavoidable." I understood the distinction immediately. Power invites resistance. Being unavoidable removes options. By the time the first injunction was filed, Halecrest Manor had gone quiet in a way I'd never seen before. No cars in the driveway. No lights in the east wing. No staff coming and going. The house that had once thrived on orchestration had run out of scripts. The trust released a statement the next morning. Short, careful, bloodless. It acknowledged the codicil. It announced an interim administrative transition. It avoided my name entirely. That avoidance was the last move of a system that still believed silence could reshape reality. It couldn't. The market reacted before the media did. Partners paused. Sponsors withdrew. Institutions that had aligned themselves with the Hale Legacy Trust began distancing language audits, removing logos, editing press releases. No one wanted to be the last one standing next to a structure already tilting. By noon, the headlines caught up. Not dramatic, not accusatory, clinical. Authority transfers following internal governance failures. Legacy Trust faces oversight as beneficiary clause activates. My name appeared for the first time in a major outlet that afternoon. Not as a victim, not as a whistleblower, as a legal fact. Maeve read the article twice, then set her tablet down. "They never saw this version of you coming," she said. "They didn't believe it was possible," I replied. Jonah's phone rang constantly that day. Journalists, analysts, legal observers. He declined most of them. Chose carefully. Accuracy mattered more than speed now. At 3:18 p.m., Leora released her own statement. It was emotional, carefully so. She spoke about confusion, about pressure, about believing decisions were temporary, about being caught between loyalty and responsibility. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny. She positioned herself. The internet noticed immediately. Positioning only works when there's still ground beneath you. By evening, screenshots surfaced. Old emails, meeting notes, language that didn't align with confusion. The phrase temporary removal appeared nowhere. Jonah forwarded them to me with one line. "This won't hold." That night, Marissa tried again. This time she didn't call. She sent a message through an intermediary, one of the trust's former advisors. "She's asking for a meeting," the advisor said carefully. "Off the record." "No," I replied. "She says she wants to explain." "I understand everything I need to," I said. "Explanations are for people who still believe perception can change outcome." The next morning, I drove to Clearwater City for the first time since everything broke open. Jonah insisted I be physically present for the transfer filing. Maeve came with me, silent but steady. The courthouse wasn't grand. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a place designed to neutralize drama. The clerk didn't recognize my name. That felt right. I signed where Jonah indicated, initialed where required. The transfer was logged at 10:42 a.m. With that, the Hale Legacy Trust ceased to function as it had existed. Not dissolved. Replaced. Outside, reporters waited. Cameras ready. Microphones extended. I stopped just short of the steps. Jonah looked at me. "You don't have to." "I know," I said. I stepped forward anyway. "I'm not here to speak about my family," I said calmly. "I'm here to speak about governance. Accountability doesn't disappear because a name is respected. And silence isn't proof of innocence. It's often the opposite." I didn't take questions. I didn't need to. The statement did exactly what it was supposed to do. It reframed the narrative without emotion. It removed the temptation for spectacle. Back at Maeve's house that evening, the first federal filing became public. Formal investigation. Multiple counts. Multiple entities. The trust's website went offline permanently. That night, something unexpected happened. I slept. Deeply. Without replay. Without anticipation. The following days unfolded like the aftermath of a storm. Quiet work, careful rebuilding, no rush. Jonah coordinated transitions. Independent administrators stepped in. Oversight committees formed. I wasn't asked to lead publicly. That was intentional. The work didn't require a face. It required structure. Leora disappeared from public view. No interviews. No posts. Her silence felt different than before. Not strategic. Protective. Edwin issued a resignation letter that read, like a summary of regret without ownership. Marissa issued nothing. Weeks passed. Spring edged its way into Northland State slowly. Snow receded. Roads cleared. The world resumed routines that had nothing to do with the collapse of one carefully curated family legacy. One afternoon, Mae found me in the yard, hands in the soil, planting something she said would survive harsh seasons. "You're building again," she observed. "I never stopped," I replied. The final attempt came quietly. A letter arrived, forwarded through legal channels. From Marissa. This one wasn't strategic. It wasn't polished. It was handwritten. She spoke about fear. About trying to protect something she thought fragile. About believing control was the same as care. About being afraid that if she loosened her grip, everything would fall apart. She asked if we could talk. I read the letter once. Then I placed it back in the envelope and returned it unopened. Some conversations come after accountability. Some never do. Jonah didn't comment when I told him. He simply nodded. "That door closes on its own," he said. The final public reckoning arrived without ceremony. A press release. A court docket update. A regulatory notice. The Hale Legacy Trust was formally restructured under independent governance, with no family members holding authority. The name remained. The power did not. That night, I stood outside Maeve's house, looking up at a sky finally free of storm clouds. The air smelled like thawing earth and pine. I thought about the east wing of Halecrest Manor, the portraits, the silence trained to behave. None of it mattered anymore, because the truth didn't need walls to hold it. It had already moved on. I thought the last thing would be loud. Some final confrontation. A door slammed. A sentence that landed like a gavel. That's how endings are written in stories that need permission from drama to feel complete. This one didn't. It ended the way real power shifts always do, quietly, while everyone else is still arguing about what already changed. The morning after the trust was formally restructured, I woke before sunrise. Not because I was anxious, but because my body finally remembered how to wake up without bracing itself. Light slipped through the curtains at Maeve's house, pale and honest. No alarms. No notifications vibrating with urgency. Just morning. I made coffee and stood by the window while it brewed, watching frost retreat from the edges of the yard. Spring in Northland State doesn't announce itself. It arrives cautiously, testing the ground before committing. I understood that instinct. Maeve joined me without speaking. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't congratulate me. She just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, as if that was always where she'd planned to be. "They won't bother you again," she said finally. "They might," I replied, "but it won't matter." That was the difference. Jonah called later that morning. His tone was lighter than it had been in weeks, but still measured. "It's done," he said. "All filings finalized. Oversight committee seated. Independent administrators confirmed." "And my role?" I asked. "Advisory only," he said. "If you want it. Invisible if you don't." I smiled. Invisible sounds perfect. He chuckled softly. You've earned that choice. After the call, I packed my things. Not because I was leaving Maeve's home behind, but because I was moving forward. There's a difference. I returned to Clearwater City that afternoon. My apartment felt smaller than I remembered, but lighter. Sun spilled across the floor, touching corners that used to feel neglected. I opened the windows and let fresh air do what it does best. Remind spaces they don't have to hold their breath. The boxes I'd never unpacked were still stacked near the wall. I opened one at random. Inside were old notebooks, drafts, half-finished ideas I'd abandoned years ago because they didn't seem practical enough, polished enough, safe enough. I sat on the floor and flipped through them slowly. Some ideas don't die. They wait. That evening, I walked through downtown Clearwater City alone. People passed me without recognition. I liked that. No whispered assumptions. No glances sharpened by curiosity. Just another person moving through her own life. I stopped at a bookstore near the river. The same one Edwin and Marissa used to take us to when we were children, before everything became about appearances. I hadn't realized until then how carefully I'd avoided it. Inside, the smell of paper and dust hit me like a memory I didn't have to protect anymore. I wandered the aisles, pulling books at random. Titles about governance, ethics, personal narratives written by people who'd walked away from things that looked impressive and chosen something quieter instead. At the counter, the clerk looked up and smiled. "Find everything you needed?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. The following days passed without incident. That too felt unfamiliar. No calls from journalists. No legal updates requiring immediate attention. No family members attempting to rewrite the past through carefully worded messages. Silence this time wasn't tactical. It was acceptance. I did receive one final communication. Not from Marissa. Not from Edwin. From Leora. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't defensive. It was short. I didn't know how to stop once it started. "I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just wanted you to know I finally see what I was part of." I read it once. Then I archived it. Seeing is a beginning. It isn't a bridge. Weeks later, I drove past Halecrest Manor without meaning to. The road curved that way, and I followed it out of habit before I realized where I was. The gates stood open now. The grounds looked the same but emptier. Like a stage after the lights have gone down and the audience has left. I didn't stop. I didn't look for the East Wing. I kept driving, because that place no longer defined where my story paused or continued. Instead, I focused on what came next. With Jonah's help and Maeve's guidance, I began building something new. Not a replacement. Not a rebuttal. Something that didn't exist to oppose anything at all. The Northbound archive launched quietly. No press release. No ceremony. Just a registered mission and a clear purpose to document, protect, and preserve truth where power once relied on silence. People found it anyway. They always do when something is needed. Emails arrived. Stories. Files. Questions. Each one handled carefully. Independently. Without spectacle. Without turning anyone into a symbol. I worked from a small office overlooking the river. White walls. A desk I chose myself. No portraits watching me work. Sometimes Mae visited. Sometimes Jonah stopped by. Most days it was just me and the quiet hum of something finally aligned. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a submission, I paused and leaned back in my chair. The city moved outside the window, unaware of how much weight I'd been carrying just weeks earlier. I thought about the night I stood barefoot in the snow, breath burning, body failing, the world narrowing to white and pain and silence. And I realized something that surprised me. That night didn't break me. It clarified everything. They thought erasing me would make the story cleaner, easier, safer. What they didn't understand was this. When you remove the one person who refuses to lie, the truth doesn't disappear. It waits. And then it speaks with more authority than anyone expected. I no longer measure my life by what I lost that night. or what I exposed afterward, or what my family failed to be. I measure it by what I no longer have to carry. The fear, the doubt, the need to be remembered by people who benefited from forgetting me. Some people inherit houses, some inherit names. I inherited a lie and chose to dismantle it quietly, piece by piece, until nothing false remained standing. If you've ever felt erased, pushed out, or told, directly or indirectly, that your presence was inconvenient, I hope this story reminds you of something important. Being written out doesn't mean you were wrong. Sometimes it means you were too honest for the version of the world someone else needed to protect. Thank you for staying with this story. If it resonated, share where you're watching from or what part felt closest to your own experience. And consider subscribing for more real stories like this. Someone else out there needs to hear that silence doesn't get the final word.